Hi all, good morning and welcome to this webinar on RBI and regulatory vernacular language requirements and how to make sure your document execution or e-sign flow is compliant with them. As we wait for the last few people to join, just a few house rules first. The total session that we have prepared will last about 35 minutes, probably less. After that, we'll have an open Q&A where we will give you mic access to ask your question. But if at any point in time during the session you have a question, please drop it in the Q&A box. We usually take most of them during the session itself, especially if it relates to something we're talking about at that moment in time. We'll also be sharing a recording of the session in the next 48 hours. So in case you have to drop off midway or someone that couldn't make it, don't worry, we'll send across a recording by Thursday latest. So I think we now have enough people. So let's begin. Just a quick introduction. I'm Aditya, Head of Marketing here at Legality. Before Legality, I was a lawyer who has worked on matters of regulatory and banking compliance. I'm joined today by Shubhesh, our Head of Product Marketing, and he will be taking you through the demo in about 20-25 minutes. So the session is split up into 4 parts. In the first part, we will be taking you through the various RBI rules that mention vernacularization of documents. This will be around 7 to 8 minutes of actually decoding what these rules say. In the second part, we'll show you how to technically implement and comply with these requirements in your agreement journeys. In the third part, we'll actually show you a demo of an agreement flow via Legality with these vernacularization features enabled. So you get an idea of how does the technical thing actually work in reality. And finally, we'll throw open the floor for an open Q&A where we'll give you mic access and you can ask questions. So let's just dive straight into the actual legal requirements. They are quite simple, right? So let's dive in, right? Vernacular compliance essentially hinges on 2 questions. One, what languages should I support? Would Hindi or English just work? Just having Hindi and English work? Question we often receive. Second, what exactly has to be in vernacular? This is, of course, the key operational element. Let's deal with the first question first. What languages do you need to support? And for this, let's dive into the actual language of the requirements. So you take any circular or master direction by the RBI concerning the customer facing journey, especially in the recent past, and by recent past, maybe last 10, 15 years, you will see some mention of the word vernacular or something similar, right? For example, the RBI Gold Loan Directions 2025 specifically mention in the language of the region or the borrower. The RBI KFS Circular specifically mentions in a language understood by the borrower. The DLD, of course, refers the KFS. The Fair Practice Code for NBFCs mentions vernacular language or a language understood by the borrower. The credit card and debit card directions mention shall be mentioned in clear and simple language, preferably in English, Hindi, and the local language, right? And finally, the Master Circular on Customer Service in Banks mentions use of Hindi or regional languages, right? And now, not just the RBI, but even the DPDP Act also imposes a requirement at the consent collection stage, which is an integral part of all your journeys, where it now requires all languages under schedule of the Constitution, right? That's about 22 languages. So the net conclusion of all this, and I told you it's quite simple, right? Both the RBI and DPDP are crystal clear. Vernacular, regional, local, whatever specific word you want to use, the meaning is crystal clear. You need vernacular language. You need to support vernacular languages in your journey. Seems quite straightforward, but there is one pushback we often receive for this, which I need to address, right? So the main pushback is what I just said, like it's the argument on screen, right? Look, RBI is also accommodating English. They say English or local languages in many cases. And my customer knows English. I just know that for a fact, right? To be honest, this assumption might be true for certain products, let's say corporate lending. But for other products, especially retail products or CASA products, it is not savings account products. It's not actually borne out by data. A recent study, and we'll share the link as well in the deck when we share it after the webinar, found that only 3% of people in rural areas speak English fluently, and only 12% in urban areas speak English fluently. In other words, 97% of your base is not well versed in English in rural areas. So for MFIs, agri lenders, and more, if you serve this base, English is not the primary language. And 88% of your customer base in urban areas, and I think everyone on this call serves this base for sure, is not comfortable in English. Even if you assume a very generous margin of error for this study, the numbers are pretty directionally clear. Most Indians are not comfortable or fluent in English, and that forms the bulk of the base for BFSI companies, right? They do not truly understand English, in the words of the RBI. And in cities, if you operate in cities with great linguistic diversity like Bangalore or Bombay, you really cannot assume also, right, that, okay, they must know Kannada here or they must know Marathi or Hindi here, right? Fundamentally, if you see the language of the rules, the RBI in many of them and many of the general application ones like KFS mentions language understood by the borrower, right? Which actually ties the vernacular language that has to be supported to the unique needs of the borrower and not related to the geography. Although in some rules they say like language of the region, in most general applicability clauses that we saw above, RBI ties the language to the borrower itself, right? So you don't just need the language of the region or take guesses. You actually need to be able to deliver vernacular flows in all languages potentially spoken by your prospective customers. So that's the first question. But what we just discussed naturally gives rise to a second question, right? So the first question is, what all languages do I need to support? You need to support all vernacular languages potentially spoken by your borrowers. Now, fundamentally, how does this actually work? How can I anticipate the borrower needs and deliver it in that flow, right? Before they've even walked into my office, right? So that's why we come to the next question, right? And next question, of course, is, okay, I need to have wide vernacular support, but on what do I actually do this, right? There are many touch points. What exactly has to be in vernacular? And the answer is a lot, right? Look through the directions on screen, right? Gold direction says all communication, especially terms and conditions. KFS Circular says the KFS shall be written, right? The Fair Practices Code says all communications. Credit card direction says terms and conditions. Master Circular and Customer Service by Bank says transacting business, right? Especially in communications with borrowers. And of course, DPDP says the consent box itself needs to be in vernacular, right? The emphasis across most of these rules, especially the general purpose ones, is on as wide a span as possible, right? With RBI insisting on communications as a whole being in vernacular, in the circular on banks, in the Fair Practice Code, in the gold loan directions, right? It's not just about a specific document, it's about communications, right? This means all touch points. In a branch, this means notice boards, brochures, agreements, KFS, and other docs, interfaces present at the branch like tablets, and even verbal communication by the bank staff, right? And what I'm showing you on screen is quite intuitive to understand. It's a no-brainer, right? Yes, these are touch points at a physical branch. Yes, they need to be in vernacular. But what people don't realize often is that when there is heavy digitization of processes, which most of you are undergoing right now, you don't only have these physical touch points, right? You now have an increasing number of digital touch points and communication throughout the journey, right? So just like in the branch, you need things like the website and online brochures to be in vernacular. You need your digital agreements, KFS, to be in vernacular. You even need your instructions and various boxes that customers have to tick in your journey also in vernacular, right? Because this is key communication about how they need to proceed, just like a notice board at a branch or a verbal instruction by a branch officer, right? So end to end, every communication touch point, whether the communication is transactional or informational, needs to be in as much vernacular as possible, right? Net, you need vernacular at all communication touch points. And that's what we've elaborated on the slide. So this brings us to the second part of the webinar. How do you actually anticipate customer needs and solve this, right? We are going to show you today how to comply in the agreement and KFS, like probably the most important piece of communication, because that's the piece of communication that also legally binds both parties. Before we dive into how it happens, there's actually one issue of vernacular declarations, right? This is a question we've received in previous webinars where we mentioned this requirement, which is a lot of lenders rely on a declaration like the one that we are displaying on screen right now to ensure vernacular compliance. Given what we discussed in the first part, can any of you tell me like what exactly is the issue with this? So just look through this document, which a lot of lenders use to comply. Think about what's actually wrong with this. I'll just pause here for 2-3 seconds. All right. So yes, the vernacular itself, the declaration itself is in English, one, not in a vernacular language. And two, the vernacular declaration, let's say you say that, no, but that declaration I put in vernacular. Even then, the declaration does not actually satisfy RBI's wide ambit of vernacularization. It's not part of the agreement. It's not a KFS. It's not part of the brochures or the digital interface. It's honestly just an attempt to check a box on vernacular without actually ensuring vernacular compliance in the true spirit of the RBI. Now, in a physical flow, complying is quite painful. What lenders often do, based on experience, is keep multiple copies at the branch, and then the RM has to juggle this around. And fundamentally, for last mile compliance, you are actually reliant on the RM. If they don't do it, there's no way for you to find out, right? There's no actual systemic way to ensure compliance in the physical process, right? With digital and digitized touchpoints, it's much easier to comply thoroughly and much easier on the people involved if you do it right. And that's exactly what this section will be about. How do you do this right digitally? In a few minutes, Shubhesh is going to show you, in about 5 minutes, Shubhesh is going to show you a live demo of this. But first, let's briefly cover the technical flow that you need to build. First step, of course, lies with the document itself. You need to ensure that you have translated versions of all your documents somewhere digitally, right? So here I've used the example of KFS. If you're a pan-India lender, just English and Hindi KFS will not work. You need your KFS in all languages to serve all the regions that you operate in, right? More specifically, for this to happen, you need to rely on one of two softwares, right? Either your LOS or your document execution platform, right? So the documents that we're talking about here, KFS here, needs to be in translated form and needs to be stored digitally as templates in either of these two pieces of software, right? So that's step one. Ensure either your LOS or document execution platform has vernacular templates stored. This is a one-time configuration that you can't avoid. Unfortunately, many people stop right there, right? Saying that, okay, now that the document is in vernacular and I've saved it, I'm actually done with RBI's compliance as far as the agreement leg of the journey is concerned. So what you actually then have in the agreement journey is a vernacular KFS and an English e-sign interface for the document. What's the issue with this? I'm just surfacing my stats again here, right? It's likely your customer does not know English. And even if they do, right? Let's say you say that, hey, they don't understand English, but they understand how to operate a UX that's in English, right? It's just what they've been used to with advent of phones, right? A Google India study found that significant amount of people, even in digital interfaces, are not comfortable with English and prefer their vernacular language for digital interfaces. So let's actually try to put ourselves in the shoes of someone who doesn't understand English. And because it looks very obvious to us, when you see an English interface, you say this is very simple, right? But let's look at what actually happens when you have an English e-sign interface, right? Bear with me now for 2 minutes, right? First of all, let's say this is the e-sign invite. Can any of you actually understand any of this? It's just a bunch of text with a button. I have no idea what I'm supposed to click. Next is the document. Okay, great. This is in vernacular, right? Because remember, we did it in step one. But then what does that button say next to the document? If I click, what does that mean? Does it mean I just sign the document automatically? Does it reject the document? I have zero clue on what it says. Now here's the e-sign screen. There's a bunch of random options because I have no clue what they say. So for me, they're random. I somehow do a scribble. That makes sense. If you have an Aadhaar e-sign, there's no scribble also. There's just more buttons, right? So I click that button on the bottom right. And now this screen is even worse, right? I just clicked. My sign is still there in the background. And now there's just a bunch of text. Looks serious because I'm being asked to check next to it. What exactly is it that I am checking? I have zero clue, yet I'm expected to do all of this, right? Because I'm used to mobile phones. So this language keeps coming up in mobile phones, so I should be expected to do this, especially walls of text, right? So this flow was in Chinese, as most of you probably realized. I don't think anyone, we chose this language because I don't think anyone on this call would know this. Just to give you an idea of what actually happens when you don't understand the language of the flow, right? So imagine doing this process. This was a demo for a webinar. Imagine you do this process when you're incurring a debt obligation, right? You are entering into a serious transaction. You are just clicking through things that you have no clue what they say, right? Would you just blindly click through buttons? Would you be confident about the process? Most likely you will feel alienated. You're like, okay, I'm taking on a loan, but I just have to click a bunch of things I don't understand. And what happens here actually on the ground in these scenarios is that the customer usually asks the branch person to just give a paper agreement, because then at least there's a familiarity of an familiar process, paper process to take refuge in, right? So this lack of information and alienation is exactly what the RBI wants you to combat with its vernacular requirement. And ultimately it will, as I said, for the reasons I mentioned, it's going to affect you operationally as well, right? Because not only will you be in violation of the RBI rules if your interface is not vernacular, because even these are communication touch points, you will face customers dropping off your digital journey, right? So your whole goal of digitization goes for a toss because they'll just ask for physical paperwork. And third, you just have customers who trust you less in general, right? Because they don't know what they have clicked through. So, yeah, sorry for that slight detour, but I think the point is that ultimately your interface is a critical part of communication in the journey, and you need to ensure it's in vernacular, right? So, how exactly do you build this operationally? So, step one, I'm repeating here, you get templates in your LOS or document execution platform and you save them. What you then do is in your document execution platform or your LOS, you save a workflow mapped to each template. So let's say I have 4 languages I want to support. I have 4 templates. I create 4 workflows, right? Each workflow is mapped to one specific template. That's what you do in the backend. Then what you do is on your app, let's say your branch app or your digital lending app, you create a front end, which is like a language select screen, right? Just like in an ATM. So when the customer selects that language, what happens is the workflow that you had created is mapped to that button, right? That workflow, so if they select, say, Telugu workflow, right? That workflow is then triggered, and the Telugu KFS kit, the Telugu interface is all shown to the customer with a single click, right? So this is essentially the kind of flow you need to build in order to anticipate customer needs, right? Where before the customer walks in, you actually support their language. The only painful part here is actually the one-time configuration in the backend, right? The top 2 steps and actually just building that front end out. But again, it's a one-time configuration, right? So it's a one-time effort that can give you vernacularization, granular vernacularization at scale, right? Ensuring that the language understood by the borrower is something you can actually deliver when they access your interface. And of course, to round this off, to round this whole process, you need an audit trail as well that shows you vernacular consent. That's something we'll show you now in the demo, which I'll hand over to Shubhesh to show you the demo. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, yeah, we'll show you the vernacular document. So some of you asking questions, right, that the document itself is not in vernacular language, it's in English. Exactly. You need both end-to-end unified in a language, in the same language. So now we'll actually show you how that works. Go ahead, Shubhesh.
Hi, thanks everyone for joining. So I'm gonna show. First of all, is my screen visible?
Yes.
Great. What I'm gonna show you is what we literally just spoke about and we showed you in a slide. This will be a KFS plus loan agreement journey, and I'll just show you how to offer this entire thing in a vernacular language. This particular screen you see right now is just like a mock that was made of LOS LMS to simulate the entire journey. This is not part of the product. This is just for understanding how legality would integrate into this entire journey when a customer is applying for a loan. Let's say they apply for a loan.
So
First,
actually, also we mentioned, right, in the previous slide before we showed the demo, that you build a front end in your app. This is like a replacement for that front end that you built. In the back end, there's a legality journey configured, a workflow configured, which Shubhesh is about to show you. But this is the third step in the deck of in the front end building a language select screen.
correct. As soon as they apply, they get a language choosing option. They can pick any language they want. Let's say I pick Marathi, or let's say I pick Gujarati. So everything in the interface should be in Gujarati itself. People who understand Gujarati, they'll be able to read what all of this means. I don't understand.
Again, one more thing is, remember, this is our mock LOS. So this vernacularization is something you need to ask your LOS provider or your front-end app builder, right? So up till this point, we've shown you the journey outside legality, what happens when you select language, how it should be, right? From the perspective of RBI's compliance of how all touch points should be. Now, Shubhash will show you how that transitions into the legality journey.
This is the KFS stage wherein the loan has been sanctioned, offer has been created. Now they will have to acknowledge the KFS and then they'll go to signing the document. Sorry, the loan agreement. So they'll click on this, and as you'll see
Shubhash,
this,
your screen is not moving.
so I
Sorry.
click on that
Yeah,
button, and now I've been
now
redirected
it's
to
moving.
this legality interface wherein if you see the document is in Gujarati also, and the interface is also in Gujarati. But let's say just wanted to show you like a couple of other languages. I change the language there and I get
Shubhash,
Bangla.
your screen is gone.
Uh, it's gone. Wait, is it visible now?
Yes.
Great. Yeah. So I just wanted to show you how other languages would also work in a similar way. Let's say they selected this language in the previous language selection interface. They click on the KFS link and they get the KFS in that language with the interface in that language. Let me just show you one more before I proceed. I'll pick this one. So I click on KFS again, and as you'll see, the language of the KFS is changed, and so has that for the interface. So you can configure it for whatever languages you need for places where in which area you are currently doing lending in. I am comfortable, let's say, in Hindi because Hindi is a language that I understand besides English. So I'll continue this journey in Hindi. As you can see, like I understand Badhayo app. So I'll click on KFS. If you see the KFS, fully filled KFS is also available. It's in Hindi, and interface also it says Aage Badhe, which is in Hindi. So I'll click on this. I'll just scribble my signature for KFS acknowledgement. I'll click on Aage Badhe again. And as you can see, the e-sign consent now is also in Hindi, which is something I can understand. So I'll click on sign kare. Before this, I was not able to understand anything that was written in the interface. I knew exactly what clicks to do because I know the product, but if I'm a person who does not know this product, there is no way for me to be able to understand what it meant and what I was doing. Similarly, they can then get redirected to the loan agreement, which is again also in Hindi. And if you'll see, the interface again is in Hindi. Click on Aage Badhe again, and I'll do Aadhaar OTP. I can see like exactly what each option means, and OTP is the one I'm comfortable with. If you want, you can also put iris, biometric, or face Aadhaar e-sign. I'll just click on Aage Badhe. I'll give my e-sign consent for the loan agreement, and I'll be redirected to the NSDL portal. Here also, you can change the language. Of course, NSDL doesn't offer you as many languages as we do. There are like bunch of languages available. Give my consent for the e-sign on NSDL, and then I'll enter my Aadhaar number. Just give me a second while I enter this number. I'll click on OTP bheje. Now I'll just enter my OTP. Once this is done, I'm going to show you what signed document also looks like along with the audit trail, where we'll show you the e-signed consent that we had collected. Yeah, this is done. Even the last screen is very clear. Like people know दस्तावेज पर साइन किए गए, which means like the document has been signed, so they get that confirmation there as well. Now these are my documents that I have signed, so I'll show you the audit trail. So this is my audit trail. It contains different actions that were taken when it was opened, the document, which device was used to open it, who signed it, and if you'll see my e-sign consent, it is captured in Hindi. So whenever there is a case for enforcing a particular document, you can prove it also that consent was also collected in that particular language. But beyond this, I wanted to show you one more thing. For TPDP Act that's forthcoming, or rather currently we're waiting for the rules. Even for this, when you're collecting consent for data processing for people that they're applying for the loan, that also you can do in vernacular language. I'll show you quickly how. And this is a new product that we have launched called Consent, and we'll tell you how you can get in touch with us to see a demo of it in some time. But let's say your customer apply for the loan, you'll have to collect their consent if you want to process their data. They fill this particular form. Let's assume this is a loan application, and they'll be given this pop-up. But English is not something that I'm comfortable with, so I can change it to any of these languages available. Let's say I understand Hindi, and I select Hindi, and everything on this page is now in Hindi. So I know exactly where my data is going, how it's going to get used, and then I can give consent accordingly. Similarly, let's say I want to do Manipuri. Same thing happens. The language changes. I understand exactly what's happening, and I will give consent accordingly. Or even let's say Tamil. Basically, any language that you see in this particular drop down, you can change the consent language to that. Now I'm going to quickly show you how to set this up in the dashboard, that in the legality dashboard.
Those of you who are legality customers on this call, if you have an existing legality account, especially if you have a business account, one of our business plans, you can start using local languages at no additional cost, right? So the setup Shubhesh has shown you, you can literally go do this right away today itself. Of course, we'll show you how to get in touch with us in case you need help in setting this up for you.
Yeah. So in the workflow we showed you, first step we said was to configure the template. In my sandbox, I've already configured this template for KFS in Hindi.
Yeah.
I'll just
So
show it to you.
template configuration is a one-time thing, and that requires some work. We will be happy to do it for you, help you translate and vernacularize your templates. That does take time. That's not something you can do just today after this call. That requires you to give us your template. If you have the translation ready, give us a translation. Otherwise, we'll translate it for you, send it back to you for vetting. And then once you finalize the document, you give it to us, and then we put a template, right? We can't, of course, have instant translation, not just due to technical limitations, because I think now soon we will be able to build it. It's just that it's a legal document, and contents of the document always have to come from your legal team, right? So this document leg is a one-time thing. The next step is something you can do right away.
Yeah.
And to those of you who raised your hand, we will just start taking questions in about 3 to 4 minutes. So just keep your hand raised. We'll give you mic access.
Yeah. So as you can see, we've already added a bunch of fields into this particular template. We've translated the entire Annex A into Hindi, and we've set this template up on my particular sandbox. You can do it similarly in your legality sandbox or UATs. Next step is creating a workflow. So to create a workflow, you just simply create a workflow. Let's say create a KFS Hindi. I'm doing V2 because there's already a KFS Hindi workflow in my sandbox. So I'll select that KFS Hindi template. This is the template that I showed you just now. This is the first step wherein you're selecting the template. But let's say you have LOS LMS integration wherein you're creating the KFS itself in vernacular language in your LOS LMS. So you can even pass that as a PDF to legality in your workflows. But here, just for the sake of this demo, I'm going to use this template that I just showed you. I'm going to click next. This is the fully translated KFS. These are the fields that would need to be filled for each KFS by the person who's executing it. All of this is again one-time configuration. Next time, whenever you're sending KFS, all you need to do is just enter data as needed and send it out. You don't need to do any configuration. Your agents will not have to do anything that's not allowed for them to do. So I'll configure this document. Next step is configuring how many people you need to sign. Let's say there is only one borrower in this. So I'll just keep this. I'll select the e-sign tab as quick sign. This is an OTP-less virtual sign that we have, which is great for acknowledging Vernac KFS documents. Now the next part is enabling local language interface. How do you change the language of the interface itself? Here we give two options. One, you let the person change the language before they proceed to e-sign. This is not an option that you would want to provide in cases like KFS, because you would want the language of the interface to be the same as that of the KFS. So I'll select on set a default language, and since my KFS is for Hindi, I'll select Hindi language and I'll click on save. And that's it. It's literally that easy. I'll click on next. I'll show you how this works. I can put my eSign coordinates wherever on this page I want by just clicking on this thing and doing custom coordinates. Let's say I want it here. I'll click on save. So now every time this workflow is run, interface and the document both would be in a language that you understand. I'll just keep filling this KFS for now. And I'll just enter my details here and click on next and send invite. So when this thing comes to me, it will have a Hindi document and a Hindi interface. I don't need to do anything. With that, the demo comes to a close. Anything else, Aditya, that you want me to
And
show?
just show the Hindi interface. Sorry. I thought it would come from the dashboard, but it didn't. Cool. I think we're into the question and answer session. Am I audible now? I think earlier, few minutes back when I was speaking, I was not audible.
Yes, you're audible. You're audible now.
Okay. Just in chat, if people can just say yes or no. Simple. Okay. Awesome. Because some people I think are still not able to hear. Anyway, cool. So yeah, this is the audit trail that Shubhash showed you. We'll just come to Q&A in a bit. This is just a recap of what actually vernacular compliance means. Again, it's super easy if you see. The only real legwork is operational legwork and actually executing this. The actual compliance requirements, there's no ambiguity. It's super clear, right? Everything possible in vernacular, right? There's no legal intricacy or anything around it. Legality, as Shubhash mentioned, we do provide it for the agreement journey. You can customize your e-sign invites, which we didn't show you in this demo, but your SMS and WhatsApp can be configured in a local language. I think WhatsApp in a few languages because Meta, like there's some Meta restrictions, but SMS can be configured in multiple languages. You can have the agreement in vernacular, again, one-time configuration. So the first two things here are a one-time config that will help you do. And then, of course, you can have vernacular e-sign consent and a completely vernacular e-sign interface with just the click of a button, as Shubhash showed you. So the second two things here, you can actually go try out right now after this in your sandbox, in your legality account. In case you do need assistance, please do reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you anytime. You can just reach out to your legality POC, or you can contact Shubhash or I on email. We'll drop our emails in the chat. You can just email us, maybe type vernacular webinar or something, the subject line, so we can email surfaces to us. And apart from the agreement journey, as Shubhash mentioned, Azima, if you can go to the next slide, we are also launching, we've actually launched it already, Consent In, which is a product that enables end-to-end DPDP compliance for businesses. So we've used our expertise in authentication, building secure flows at scale, and we've built a product for DPDP compliance as well, not just the agreement and document journey, right? So with Consent In, as Shubhash showed you, you can collect consent notice, specific and purposeful consent in 22 Indian languages as required by the DPDP Act. You can scan this if you want a specific demo of consent in. If you want to reach out to us, we'll of course share the deck with you. So you'll get this QR code in the deck as well. So yeah, you can visit legality.com if you need help with your documents, right? The e-sign journey. And you can go to consent.in if you need help with DP compliance, right? So legality.com and consent.in if you want to explore our newest, latest product. Great. If you can go to the next slide. We are also coming out with shortly, maybe in the next month, a playbook on how to actually implement e-sign flows that are accessible for India. So not only do we cover vernacular languages, we also cover how to ensure e-sign in low connectivity areas, how to ensure other accessibility features are actually enabled in your flow, and how that will actually help you solve the last mile gap and allow you to actually eliminate physical processes for good, right? Because accessibility is the one gap that prevents, like when customers or branch officers give up on the digital flow, that's a battle we don't see people usually winning. So accessibility in the flow is key to ensuring customers and borrowers and your customers and your staff are actually won over by the digital process. Yeah, and in case you want access to this playbook, you can scan and fill details if you want to know about our other webinars. When we do them, when we launch our playbooks, you can scan and opt into our weekly updates list. We literally just send you one update per week. Sometimes we send it once every 2 weeks, either via email or WhatsApp. You can scan and fill details to get these updates, right? Either relevant regulatory updates, latest product updates, or case studies from other lenders, right? Or other companies using legality. Yeah, so with that out of the way, and we'll share this deck with you so you can scan this QR whenever you want. Let's come to questions. So you can either drop it in the Q&A box or you can raise your hand and we'll give you mic access. I think someone had their hand raised during the session. You can raise your hand again. I think they've dropped. There's also a poll on screen in case you're interested. We can help you map out compliance in your flows. So do let us know. Like Shubhash and I are here. So if you have any questions, do raise your hand or ask in the Q&A box. Just also curious, you can drop it in the chat as well. How many, I think what we've seen is usually partial vernacularization, where let's say the agreement is in vernacular, some part of the interface is in vernacular, but a lot of things are not in vernacular, right? Just curious, how many are fully vernacular right now? How many are partially vernacular? And how many are not vernacular? So we've received one question. Does legality provide translation services? So Arvind, great question. As I mentioned to you, yes, we do have empaneled translators. So what you can do is you can share your documents and templates with us. Our template team will run it by our translators, or we'll connect you with our translators directly and we'll give you the translated version. Of course, we won't make your translated version live until your team gives the final say so, right? So yes, we can actually help you facilitate this process. It's not in the product, it's a service we connect you with. But the ultimate end goal of translation will get done. Thanks for that question, Arvind. Anyone else has any questions? Feel free to ask or raise your hand. Of course, we will also be sending you this webinar recording in the next 48 hours. You can also reply to that if you have any questions. And once again, you can contact Shubhash or me directly on email, dropping that in again in the chat box, as well as our URLs. Yes, Naresh, we'll share it with your ID. In case you've not joined from this ID, we will make a point to share it to this ID as well. Thanks. Cool. We'll just leave the floor open for about a minute or two in case anyone has any questions. Of course, happy to stay if people have other questions, like happy to stay for longer as well. But in case we don't receive any questions, we'll close in a minute. Yep, there's one question we received. Thanks, Mithun. So while translating, there may be a chance of losing the original meaning. How can this be handled? So two parts, right? There's interface translation and there's document translation. So Shubhash, if you can reshare your screen. So with document translation, the answer is very simple. The document has to undergo multiple parties vetting it. Your legal and compliance team fundamentally needs to have the final say over it. So yes, that will be slight effort because legal clauses have to actually be translated. The true meaning has to be translated. This, I won't deny, is going to be a back and forth. This is going to take time. Of course, once you do it, it's done, right? And you can use that agreement in perpetuity until, let's say, a clause changes. So for the legal agreement, the actual legal like the legal agreement finalization workflow that most companies have with their compliance teams, multiple layers of compliance teams, would take care of this. Your legal is not going to let you. In case you are on the legal team, then basically your team will have to ensure that this happens. If you're not on the legal team, your legal team is not going to let an agreement out without its original meaning. With regard to the interface, so what we do is we do not do instant translation of the interface. We have currently 11 languages baked in, and we've actually done colloquial translations of the interface. So we'll show you an example. So if you see in English, by clicking this checkbox and sign document, right? You have this in English, right? How do you translate this? We don't do a literal translation, right? Because literal translation often loses meaning. We do a colloquial translation where it won't be in direct, like what it says. It will be in how that language says the same thing, right? So Shubhash, if you can switch around a bit. So if any of you understand and can read the language that Shubhash is cycling through, that's what it says, right? So we have done colloquial translation. So you can go through this flow in your legality sandbox. In case you don't have a legality sandbox, get in touch with us. We'll give you a legality sandbox. No catch, there's no catch or no extra charges or anything. We'll just hand over a legality sandbox. And you can actually go through these translations. We've colloquially translated it for this specific purpose to ensure that people actually understand what it means and it's not just a formal literal translation. So if you see, it's not a like the vernacular here will not literally map to the English. It will semantically map to the English. It will mean the same thing. It will be what language speakers of that language understand to be the thing that you want to convey. So yeah, so for the interface, net for the interface, it's handled by us, especially the e-sign interface. For the document, it's going to be a back and forth. We do have translators we can connect you with, but fundamentally you'll need to have it reviewed as well. So that workflow, it will be an extra step in your agreement finalization workflow for sure. So that's regard to both document and interface. For yeah. Thanks for that question. It's a very key question because often people just take translation to mean just formally translate, right? But really, as you mentioned, the meaning does get lost in a literal translation. So you do need to put effort and apply mind to what you're actually translating and what you're translating it into. Because even the RBI has said, understood by the borrower. The key here is understanding and comprehension, not just formal compliance. Great. Do we have any other questions? Please do ask. Happy to stay. So we'll leave it open for another minute. Otherwise, we'll end the webinar and of course, send you the recording in the next 48 hours.